We have with us Marla Becker, who's the executive director of Aljoya Mercer Island. And I will let Marla introduce herself more, tell you more about her. But that is a beautiful community if you have not been there. And with her is Lynn Meyer. Lynn Meyer is a resident in Aljoya Mercer Island. And I have come to know Lynn since we started this program back in its very early days. And Lynn is just like family to me. We've become very close. We send cards. She's sending me a letter in the mail. You heard that, those of you who were on here early, like a legit letter. So she's my dear friend. And so you're going to hear a little bit tonight what it's like to boots on the ground from an executive director and then from a resident in the community. So with that, Lynn and Marla, the show is yours.
Thank you so much. So, a little bit about my background. I am hospitality, food and beverage, hotel management, and then 30 some years ago found my way to senior living. And I've never looked back. It has been a fabulous journey. I work for a company called Era Living. We have 8 communities all within the Seattle area, all within driving distance of each other. And it's a husband and wife who started the communities, and their son-in-law now runs that business as our CEO. And it's small enough that we all know each other. We can all travel to help each other out. I have subbed at every community as an executive director except for one, and many of them twice or 3 times. So it's really nice to work for a small local family owned company. And the only other thing I'd love to say about that is that we really do put residents first. And the best part is when our residents ask for something, we're not waiting for an answer from Houston or Florida or Chicago. They're right here. They know exactly what's going on. They know our residents often by face and name. And so it's been a great experience to work for a small family owned company. And I've been doing it for a little over 30 years. So that's me. Lynn, you want to give a little background?
Well, as Nancy said, my name is Lynn Meyer, and I was born and raised in Seattle. I moved to Mercer Island 61 years ago. And as I got older and got tired of cleaning my own gutters because I was divorced and was on my own, I decided I needed to find some place that would take care of me as I got older. And I found Aljoya 16 years ago.
She is what we call pioneer. She moved in when we opened up the doors.
Right. There's nothing like being a pioneer.
Yes, but you got to pick your own apartment that way.
Yeah,
you had lots of choices that way.
Sure. And so I didn't see Aljoya. I just saw a piece of paper, and they handed me, at the time there were only two bedrooms left. They handed it to me and said one or the other. I said, I don't know which. So they said, we'll hold both of them. And then I chose this one, which looked very strange on paper. And it's probably the greatest apartment. Marla calls it my tree house, and it is. And I think at the end of our talk, Nancy or Darcy will show you a film of my apartment, so you will see. But do I love it here? You bet. And am I glad that I could stay on the island? Of course. And I've been able to keep my friends who I knew here and yet still live here and be taken care of. I don't have to worry about the gutters anymore.
So today we're going to talk about a vision of optimal aging, and we're a little biased because I run a community and Lynn lives in that community. Some of the terminology you'll hear, we talk about aging in place, we talk about flexible licensing, so I will explain both of those. We do talk about the Department of Social and Health Services, which we call DSHS in our state. and activities of daily living, which you often hear called ADLs. So aging, I'll launch right in. Aging in place is a term that states have set guidelines for so that communities can retain residents who eventually may need a higher level of services because of a higher level of acuity. And so Washington, our state, has set some pretty specific guidelines for aging in place. There are two models that you'll mostly see that allow communities to work residents through those stages of aging. The first one you often hear called traditional continuing care retirement communities. They have 3 levels of care: independent, assisted, and nursing care. And Lynn has coined an actual term that I love for that traditional model of aging in place, and she calls it the tiered model. Because residents have to move, basically they come in as independent living residents and they choose an apartment. And then if they need assisted living services, they need to move to a different wing or a different building to get those services. And if they need nursing care services, then they move on to a separate building for nursing care help. So using that tiered makes sense to me. So I love that term that you have. The second model in this state is what we call flexible licensing. And this is a model that Era Living communities, our 8 communities, have embraced. Embraced so much that we actually I opened the first community that the state allowed to have flexible licensing in 1997. And what that is that residents can choose an apartment of their choice as independent residents. And then if and when they might need assisted living services, there's no reason to move. We as a company, as a community, just relicense their apartment for assisted living, and the care comes to them. And if they need nursing services, then they can access their Medicare Part B, and the care comes to them in their own apartments without any moving. So we love it because when you don't move apartments, you don't leave the relationships that you built with your friends in the restaurants, in lectures, or the staff that you've seen every day, because we're all sharing one building and people stay in their own apartments. And we were fortunate in the state of Washington that we had 2 leading nurse gerontologists. The first was Dr. Reba DeTournier, and she was the dean at the School of Nursing at the UW. And the second was Dr. Heather Young, and she was also one of the teaching directors, doctors there at the UW. And they had this flexible licensing idea in mind, and they actually went to our state legislature and explained that it would be a better way for seniors to age. And the state agreed. And in 1997, we were able in this state to license for flexible licensing. So those are the 2 different ones that we always want to present, is that there is a continuing care model where you do move in order to receive additional care, or the flexible licensing where we just relicense the apartment for the care we want to deliver. And Lynn has a case of a friend that I want to stop and allow her to spend some time talking about in that tiered model.
Well, actually, I was at my mother's house and the phone rang, and a friend of hers who was living at Park Shore, which is a tiered home down in Madison Park. And I could hear her crying on the phone. And my mother was trying to soothe her. She had been a neighbor of my mother's. And I said to Mother afterwards, what in heaven's name was wrong? Because she loved Park Shore. And she said, well, she went to lunch with a group of women outside of the residence. And when they came back, she went up to her apartment and her key didn't work. She couldn't open the door. And she went down to the front desk and explained it to them, and they said, oh, yes, they knew. They had moved her to assisted living while she was gone. She was hysterical, to be honest with you. Why? She wasn't even on a walker. I believe she had a cane, but you know, why they did it, I don't know. But they can, and they did. And that was the beginning of my saying, I'm not going to go to a tiered living facility, because not only do you leave your home at an age where it's very disconcerting, but you aren't moved to another apartment. You're moved to a room.
Or a smaller apartment. It's
Yeah.
always a smaller
Yes.
move.
Right.
So you
Some
wouldn't
have-
have your 1,000 square foot apartment and then have assisted living in an 1,000 square foot apartment. It is always smaller.
Exactly. And this was what upset her so much. There was not even a little, well, there was a tiny little refrigerator on the floor, and versus what she had. And so at that point in time, I was probably in my middle 60s, and I said, I will find someplace that is not going to do this to me. And that's Aljoya.
And in fairness, the story that Lynn is telling you did happen a number of years ago.
Oh, yes.
The state would not allow someone to move them without them knowing, but the state does allow a community to say, you have 30 days to either move where we would like you to be in our assisted living or to move out. So now the state gives you a 30-day notice, allowed to give you to give the resident a 30-day notice. This was many years ago, but even now you can still get a 30-day notice to move. And you hear it can be pretty darn upsetting to have to make that move. So I want to talk a little bit about the pros. There are other pros of this flexible licensing that we talk about. One
Marla,
is, yes,
can I interrupt you for just a second?
bet.
Because I want to make sure that we get this. First of all, flexible licensing that you talk about is not available in every state.
No, it's not. There used to be 4 states. Now there are 7. The last
Yeah, I mean,
noticed.
it's a pretty rare phenomenon. And then not only that, so you happen to operate in a state that has that as an option, but I'll bet there's probably not a dozen other communities in the entire state that take advantage of that.
Right.
Would you? I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing that number. I mean, it's not that common, even though you can do it in Washington. It's not very common. And I think when you talk about the pros and the cons in a second, you'll clarify that. But I wanted the students to understand this is not a normal model. It's pretty unique.
And there's a reason for that she'll tell you.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. And so here's some of the pros. Obviously, the respect piece. When someone is aging and they may have a critical illness like that, a broken hip, or it could be as small as a broken hip, or it could even be a stroke, but then they've recovered after they go to rehab and they need some help with bathing or dressing. Asking someone to move in the middle of a health crisis, or telling family, please come and move we got to move your mom. We want to help her, but we have to move your dad in order to help him. That's tough in the middle of health crisis. So we think this flexible licensing is much more respectful. Also, as we mentioned, we share the same restaurant, the same activities, the same bus trips. So as people are aging, they're not leaving their friends and being relegated somewhere else. And the good part for our residents is that they will not hide the need for services because they're worried about being uprooted and having to move. So we've found our residents over the years will be much more open with the nursing staff to say, I think I'm getting a little more forgetful. Maybe I could use a little help with my medication, or I'm having a hard time transferring when I get up first thing in the morning, or getting dressed is taking me 2 hours. So they'll be more honest with our nursing staff to get that help because they know they don't have to be moved in order to get the help. The other thing is that couples don't need to separate. So we have many couples move into our 2 bedrooms that are 1,200, 1,300, 1,600 square feet. And as one person might need assisted living, there's no reason for them to have to move to an assisted living wing and split up as a couple, or have the couple move to a 700 square foot apartment where the staff is coming in to help one and feels right on top of the other person. So there's a lot more room when one person is needing care to get that care in a larger apartment without it being so obtrusive to the second person who is still very independent. So the privacy for the healthy person is much better in this flexible licensing. Our competitors will say, well, both can just move to assisted living, but as I said, it's always a smaller apartment, and then the care is right on top of them. Staff feel really good that they're doing the right thing by caring for our residents this way, because they know that people will be more honest, but they also know they don't have to pick and choose which residents they're going to get to take care of, because they're residents they've known since that person moved in. So the caring part from the staff, because they've seen Lynn for 15 years. So if all of a sudden she needs some help, our staff knows her. The dining people know her. The housekeepers know her. There's not a change of staff. So that piece is such a positive feeling for our residents as well. And then the support of neighbors, Lynn really needs to talk about. As people are aging in place around you, what that support looks like from each other.
Well, I want to tell a story that happened before I moved in. I had a box in my hand coming down the hall, and I knew that the lady who was going to live, or did live next door to me, had dementia. I had been told ahead of time. I had worked down at the community center with dementia patients for people for years. So I was well expecting what I would find. Coming down the hall, she says to me, "Who are you?" And I said, "My name's Lynn." And I said, "Who are you?" She said, "My name's Nora, and I don't have a brain." And I said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Well, do you have cancer?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Do you have Parkinson's?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Do you have arthritis?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, Nora, when you get old, you got to have something, so you don't have a brain." She said, "Well, now that you look at it that way," she said, that's good. I don't think she remembered our conversation afterwards, but that was all right. But as Marla said, she continued to obviously eat in the restaurant. We don't have a dining room
In the restaurant.
with all the rest of us. Sometimes she would be later on with just her caregiver, but at the time she would eat with other people. She went to the music things that we had. She went to the lectures that we had. She read, by the way, the New York Times every single morning. Mm-hmm. That was on her shelf. She remained the same. I'm not going to tell you she got better, but she certainly didn't get worse. Had she been in a tiered setup, she would have been in assisted living with other people like her. Some others might have had Parkinson's, some others might have had something else, but there would have been a number with the beginning of dementia before they would put them in
memory care.
Mm-hmm. So those people sit around and, don't even talk to one another.
You're a little biased.
Yeah, right. And down goes their memory, you know? So to see her stay as sharp, and this gal was, her background was incredible.
Yeah.
Um, so I again say, talking about being moved, as the person who would have been moved if I'd gone into a tear, if something were wrong. At, at the age of 90 or close to, I will be 89 on my next birthday, which is coming around the corner. Don't forget my card, Nancy. um, anyway, but you know, I could easily be moved in a say couple of years. That's not when I want to be up and told, I'm sorry, you can't live in your apartment. You're going to live someplace else. No, that's when I want to still feel the comforts of the home I've had around me, even though it's not my home household, but it's been my home for, in my case, 16 years.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's so important, and I think it's very important for the brain as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, and so oftentimes people say when they first come to visit us or decide to move in, but it's so expensive if we need assisted living. You know, when you talk to us about the assisted living costs, if we get to that point, it's so expensive. And so I do just want to throw out there that, you know, you can live here, pay somewhere around $5,000 to $6,000 a month, and then at the average assisted living at Aljoya is running around 3,000. So now you're at 8,000, somewhere between 8 and 9,000. Sounds like a lot of money. So times that by 12, you're at 102,000. But if you were having private care in your home at $35 an hour for 24 hours a day, now you're looking at 300,000. And even in a nursing home where you're sharing a bed, you're looking at around 175,000. So really the 102,000 to stay in your own apartment and have the care come to you, while it is expensive and not everyone can afford it, for those that can, it's definitely a nice choice.
Can I just mention that my neighbor is the same neighbor I had when I moved here 16 years ago? She was my age that I'm not right now. She was 89 when I moved here. Guess how old she is today? She's 102,
Mm-hmm.
and I just passed her about an hour and a half ago playing mahjong.
Yeah. And yes, and she is an assisted living resident at this point, but she was independent when she moved in, and that's why you two are still neighbors because of
Right.
our licensing. So let's talk a little bit about the cons. We told you all the pros. It is much, so why don't other providers in the state of Washington do it
Cool.
when they could? It is more expensive for a number of reasons. So the first being that every apartment has to pass regulation with DSHS, Department of Social Health Services, to be able to offer assisted living services. They come in and do a construction review. And the things that cost more is every apartment has to have wider hallways and doorways so it can, and bathrooms. So the bathrooms have to be larger so it can accommodate the wheelchairs if needed and walkers. We also have to have sprinkler heads every 12 feet, including closets. So when you talk about putting that system into a whole building, it becomes a much more pricey building that you're building. All the toilets need to be high-rise toilets as well. So that construction costs. Additional grab bars in the bathrooms were set up where even our towel bars are grab bars. So everything has to be in the proper studs. Everything has to be secure because you need additional grab bars as well in your bathrooms besides just the high-rise toilets. And you have to have an extra large generator and more emergency disaster equipment available because now your residents are mixed throughout the building. So you can't just say we're only going to provide for those 30 people on assisted living. We have to be able to provide for everyone. We can't say the lights can only come on in certain areas because the assisted living people are everywhere. So the generator has to be much larger. So the cost of building becomes prohibitive for many companies. So that's a big part. The cost of staffing, because if you have 30 people and they are on one floor or two floors, you can have one nursing assistant on at night. You could share one nursing assistant among two floors, really. But because ours are spread throughout the building, it takes longer to get to someone if they have an emergency. So we have to have a higher staffing level. We have to have a higher staffing level also because even as they're doing the daily tasks from our assisted living staff, they may be giving a bath on the second floor east, and then they have to travel all the way to the sixth floor to give another bath 45 minutes later. So that travel time amongst has to be counted in when you're looking at your staffing model. So that also makes it more expensive. So that's the first reason. Second reason is that it's not the right choice for everyone. Some couples don't want to see their partners age. Some couples say, I don't want to be at a point where someone's going to come in, and it could be a male caregiver to a female, and that husband's like, I'm not comfortable with this happening with my wife getting a shower, but that's the caregiver we have, and we're happy to have that caregiver, and that caregiver is a wonderful caring person. But sometimes for couples, that's very difficult to watch your partner be given that private kind of care. So for some, and we're always honest when we talk about what our model is like, that it isn't for everyone. And for some couples, they would rather be separated. At the point where one needs assisted living, they would rather that person be moved and then they go and visit, or they eat in that dining room with their partner instead. So sometimes it's that, and that's great. I mean, that's the nice thing about having both styles is that people can make choices.
That also goes for somebody who's single, like myself, who might not like to go and sit in the restaurant
Yes.
and have to sit with somebody
Yes.
who's in a walker or a wheelchair.
Yes. So Lynn's right. That other con is that some people they don't want to see themselves as aging.
Right,
And
exactly.
when you see other
Yeah.
people around you aging and you see people with dementia, you're interacting at the dinner table, in the restaurant with people with dementia, or in a motorized wheelchair, that's very difficult. So you have to make the choice that Lynn has made and other people, that I will be open and empathetic to those people because it could be me.
Oh, yeah.
At some point, it could be me. But not everybody has that empathy always to want to see aging in place, right? In their own restaurant or lecture or trip. So those are really the pros and cons. Now, one of the other cons to us as operators is while this has been allowed since 1997 by the state of Washington Department of Social Health Services, they still, these surveyors, the licensors from DSHS, still don't get it. Because we are, as Nancy said, we are so few and far between that when they come to do the annual survey, which is just they drop in, they're unannounced, they're not allowed to tell you when they're coming. They are sometimes so put out by the fact that our residents are throughout the building and that there's not one little place they can go to group them together, and that they have way more variety of reasons they're on assisted living rather than this is just the memory care wing. So we really end up as providers under that microscope by DSHS because mixing the independent and assisted are very confusing for them. And the other thing for us as the operator, any regulation that is in place for assisted living, and I'll name some of them, to keep a resident safe have to also translate to the independent living. So, for example, there's a very concrete pet program and regulations that you have to have if you're assisted living people have pets. And because we have pets throughout the building with many independent people, those independent living residents also have to follow those pet regulations, not just the assisted living, because they could be living right next door to somebody who is assisted living. So their pets also have to meet those regulations. There's another
Marla,
one.
I'd like to back up for just 1 second. Another one of the terms that was super confusing to me when I first started studying senior living was the term survey. It's another one of those words to me that's the wrong word that the industry uses, and I swear it's confusing. So it's, when we think about a survey, you think about a survey, people asking you questions, either
You're right.
verbally or whatever. It's really not a survey, it's an inspection. And it's an inspection against a code. And hospitals get them, communities
Adult
get
family homes get them.
Yeah, and it happens every year, and it's unannounced, and all of those kinds of things. But when you hear the term state survey, it's really not a survey; it's an inspection.
You're right. I will correct myself in the future. Thank you. But you are
No,
right.
that's what it is. That's what the industry calls it, is a state survey. But those of
State.
us who are not industry people, it's like, what does that even mean? So it took me a long time to figure out, oh, wait, it's a weird word that they've chosen because it's an inspection. So no, you don't have to change anything. We just need to understand it.
So that's inspection. Generally takes 3 to 5 days. And that's another, I hope that you do a class on that. If not, we'll find you someone, but that's a great opportunity to learn more about the regulations in the state of Washington and what that inspection looks like. And Nancy, I can send you we have a mock survey that we do at our company. And then that gives you an idea of what those licensors are looking for when they come in your building. It generally is 3 to 5 days.
I'd love to have that.
Yeah, a month ago, we had them come in and they were here for 2 weeks. That's unheard of. It was so grueling on the residents, the assisted living residents. They did 45-hour-long meetings with individual meetings with, now I'm not saying this is correct, but they did them. They called us every day asking for more information. Even after they said they were going to do an exit, they kept calling for more information. It was totally unheard of. It was a brand new nurse licensor. And again, she wasn't familiar with our flex licensing, and everything we did threw up red flags. Everything. So there is what's called an IDR. That is
Uh-oh, I think we lost him. Hold on. Practicing for their early August show, and they went right over her house. It was pretty amazing. So anyway, beautiful, beautiful place. Okay, so let's see.
I just
think they're
admitted them
back.
back in. Yeah. Oh, she's down on the bottom. Oh, they just got to get their camera on.
Lynn, can you hear us? Marla? I will also take this opportunity to remind you, when you do the assignment for module 4 this week, that it is located in the quiz section, but it's not a quiz. It's just there for scoring purposes, as I've mentioned. And everybody should get 25 out of 25. You can do multiple retakes till you get it right. So no excuse for not getting a perfect score on this one.
Yay.
We
Just
are
can't see you.
We can, and we'll tell you, I don't know what happened to you, but suddenly you weren't there. But while you were gone, we played the video of Lynn's apartment, and I did a little background guided tour because I know it fairly well. So they have seen that. And for those of you who may be watching
Oh,
this,
good.
who may be watching this recording later, the tour of Lynn's apartment is actually located on the homepage for this module. So be sure to check it out. Go ahead.
so sorry we lost you. So I was talking about the 2-week licensors being in the building. And so the last thing I wanted to say was, when you are unhappy as a operator, there is a way to, it's called an IDR, it's an individual dispute resolution. And you can actually call the SHS and ask to IDR any of the citations you've been given, or to talk about the process. So we as a company generally do not IDR because we will take our lumps and we don't want to make anyone mad later on coming in as licensors. However, this time we felt it was egregious enough that we will actually speak with the head of our Kent, Washington is where our DSHS office is located. And so we actually will speak with them about how the process went, because part of their mission statement from DSHS is to not be intrusive into residents and operations. So that's just a small piece of that piece. So yes, that is one of the reasons, another reason that a lot of operators don't think about flexible licensing, because they know that the state has a tough time with it. However, I think Lynn could talk a little bit like during COVID about what happened and why our residents licensing is a positive.
Well, during COVID, we were so lucky because all of us got to go down stairs at a given time and get our vaccinations of all sorts. I mean, during COVID, just obviously the COVID shot, but later on, all three. We didn't have to go to a doctor or didn't have to go to a pharmacy to get it. A gal friend of mine lives in a tiered group. And I don't mean to pick on them, but anyway, it's in Seattle, Horizon House. And their actual building is right across the street from a clinic, Virginia Mason Clinic. So as you remember, COVID started in December and January, and by the time we finally were able to get some vaccine, it was still pretty winterish.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, we come down the elevator and they tell us when we can go in and get our shots. And Horizon House takes these people, assisted living, including in walkers and wheelchairs, etc., and takes them across the street, but the clinic won't let them in except one at a time. And so they're out in the street and the wind is blowing, and in some instances they had a little bit of snow and rain. And I said to Carol, how does a person with a walker hold an umbrella and the walker at the same time? And she said, well, they had to have somebody else who wasn't on a walker to hold the umbrella for them. They left them out there she said it was between 30 and 40 minutes before the last person got in.
So our residents were pretty happy that all residents, independent and assisted,
Exactly.
could just come down to our conference center.
And we were indoors and it was warm.
So they were pretty happy about things like that we can share, because once we're setting something up for assisted living, there's no reason not to do it for everyone. So that's really the nice piece too. we have a lot of help from our home office, Era Living, and we have social workers in our buildings. And they really help us deal with many of the licensing issues and the regulations that we otherwise would probably run into trouble with by mixing everyone. I mentioned the pet. The other one is private caregivers. People are allowed to have private caregivers. Whether they're in a building with assisted living or independent or nursing, people can choose, residents can choose to have private caregivers. That's a right in the state of Washington. However, there are some very serious regulations for private caregivers. And as it turns out, because we are a mixed building, any of our independent living residents that choose to have a private caregiver, they have to make sure that those private caregivers also meet the same regulations that our assisted living staff meet. So it's a lot of follow-up on the part of operators to make sure that we are not skating regulations just because those people are independent, because they are mixed with assisted, so we need to keep safe.
And they have to be certified, right?
Mm-hmm. So in the end, we really do feel like the pros well outweigh the cons, especially for our residents. I guess.
Do you have any
Well,
questions from anybody? Madam?
Yes, there's a question in the chat. Specifically for this community, what is the age that residents could begin moving in? Such as a cutoff age of 62, or is there not one? As companies, let me scroll down here a little bit, are coming back from COVID, is your community making a steady progress to being close to back to where you were before COVID, or is it taking longer than you expected?
Oh, two good questions. So yes, you do need to be the age of 62 in order to live in most retirement communities, unless there's another regulation that you could be 55 and older, but then anyone, as long as one person in the apartment is 55, the other people could be 18. But we have chosen to be the 62 and older, which means everyone needs to be 62 years of age, even couples. So sometimes we've had, like my husband's 12 years older than me. So, often we have couples where the wife might be 60 and we're like, not yet. Come back to us in 2 years, even though your husband's old enough, you're not. So yes, you need to be 60. And then we fared really well during COVID, I have to say. Not just Era Living, but most retirement communities. Because as it turned out, what we could offer people was not just more safety, because we had care staff here and we had plenty of tests and we could test constantly, but also we had ways to keep people socially involved. So, for example, our life enrichment group went around with trolleys every single day, and they might have ice cream with a little ice cream sound going, and the ice cream trolley would come by and people would open up their doors and get ice cream. Or they'd come by and they'd have puzzles to do for the day, or some memory puzzles, and then they'd come by and collect them and give you the answers the next day. Or sometimes we had cocktails. We had lots of cocktails. Sometimes we had red and white wine delivered around. So every day there was something delivered to the apartment and staff was saying hello. And then also all of our lecturers that had been coming in, we Zoomed to their apartments. So they didn't miss out on their current events lecture or their history lecture or their comparative religion lecture. Everything was Zoomed to their apartments. We Zoomed exercise classes, although those were tough because people won't do them if they're not pushed by your neighbor. But we did Zoom those. What else? And we delivered meals every single day. Yeah. The restaurant delivered meals. So we kept our people safe. Oh, and we grocery shopped. So we have pictures of us putting like 60 bags a week of big grocery bag shopping that we would deliver to people's stores, because you had to get laundry soap or toilet paper. It's
If you could
crazy.
find it.
Yes, so we do shopping for our residents. So when our depositors or people called us and they said, oh, I don't know if I want to move into a community, we said, well, you're gonna get socialization, which you're not getting home now. Your kids can't come see you. We'll help you Zoom them. And you're still gonna have activities and we're gonna keep you safer because you will not have to go grocery shopping. We're gonna help you Zoom your doctor. So it turned out that most of us, even though initially people were very frightened after the deaths happened in some of the nursing environments and assisted living, people found out that it was actually much safer. So we did really well census wise and never took a dip.
There's
Oh.
another question in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any oh, no. There are two questions in the chat. One scroll down because I got too many things going on here. How much money do you invest in safety features for the residents?
Oh, so we have, besides the generator, we have enough water and food storage without going into our swimming pool, which we actually have a filter to do that if we had to. But we have enough water and food storage for 2 weeks for our 145 residents. However, we do tell them that there's a whole list that they should have in their apartment as well. Our generator runs heating and air conditioning in the common areas, not in the apartments, but in the common areas. So if there's a power outage in the middle of the summer and there's a heat wave going on, they can come into our common area and be cool. Same thing in the winter, they can be warm because there's so many areas to be comfortable and sit in the common areas and have heating and air conditioning. So that's definitely a safety issue. And then all of our apartments have call lights that buttons on the wall in the bathrooms and the bedrooms, and one in the living room. There's one right behind us in the apartment here that they can push for help, even independent living residents. And our wellness staff can come to them because in the state of Washington, the assisted living staff can give service for an emergent activity. So it has to be, they can't come like every day and not have that person on assisted living. But in any emergent situation, they're allowed to come and help. So all of them have those call lights.
Another question, what are the other states that offer flexible licensing?
So Oregon offers flexible licensing. North Carolina offers flexible licensing. Virginia. I think one of the latest ones I looked up was Minnesota. Now has a more flexible licensed program. And I don't remember what the other one was, but North Carolina, Virginia, Oregon, Washington were the first. And California's been trying, but they haven't been able to get it past the legislature.
That's a shame.
Did you mention Alaska earlier?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Another question, what type of training, experiences, and education do caregivers have to go through to work in the apartments?
So there's 120 hour to be a certified nursing assistant. It's a 120-hour program. And then it's 12 CEUs a year. Administrators also need 12 CEUs a year. Nurses need 12 CEUs, but that for the nursing assistants to become certified, it's a 120-hour program. And our state, which is really kind of cool, has now instituted for all nursing students that they have to do at least 6 months as a nursing assistant, yet even as nursing students. So now we get a lot of nursing students just coming through. We wish we could keep them, but they're great caregivers, but they have to have that in order to go through their nursing program. So we love that the state did that because it really adds a nice different layer of staffing for our buildings.
That's great. Other questions or comments for Lynn or Marla?
Yeah, that's more clear questions. And
Yeah, we thank you for those questions. Those are good questions.
You know, sometimes it's easier for people to put questions in a chat. No, you know, it's just more comfortable. So there, people complain a lot about Zoom and a variety of things, but I will tell you the one thing I've seen being in education for all these years is people who tend to be a bit less outgoing in class will suddenly not will be okay asking questions in the chat. So I actually think we get better involvement usually. So
I think there was one more that just popped up about cost and like affordability. And I don't remember what the actual question was, but something about, you know, how do people make it affordable, or is there a way for
oh, yeah, you great. Are there any programs you know of to help with affordability? Also, what are your favorite activities there? Thanks for finding
Okay,
that. I missed it.
last one is first. I am a bartender from way back, so I love doing cocktails, and my husband has always come with me. We met doing cocktails, bartending, serving. And so we do scratch cocktails once a month with fresh squeezed lemon and lime juice and make up cocktails and have a
on the
ball.
24th of April.
Yeah, that's what it is this time around. Yeah, every month. That's my favorite activity, and I definitely think that's one of the residents because we get everyone turning out, like 100 people of our 140. It's a big one. The first one is programs for affordability. There's not a lot out there. So Medicaid, when someone has completely exhausted their finances, Medicaid will pay for assisted living communities, but not all assisted living communities in the state of Washington are required to take Medicaid residents. We don't take any Medicaid residents. I wish we did, but unfortunately we don't. So those people who will need that assistance from the state have to move into communities they know that do take Medicaid. If you have long-term care insurance, and I was just telling Lynn about that before we got on the Zoom, my husband is having some memory loss, and I'm very glad that a number of years ago I bought long-term care insurance for both of us. Yep, because I think at some point he may need it before I do for memory issues. So long-term care insurance will pay for assisted living. It does not pay for independent, but it will cover assisted living costs, both rent and the services and the ADLs, the activities of daily living.
The other thing that Marla will tell you is, as you know, we're one of few that we own our own residence. We don't rent them. We pay a rental fee because we have everything given to us except our phone, including the computers. But if perchance, and you can talk about this, because we own it.
So our residents have put down an entrance fee, and that entrance fee is 80% refundable. So we as a company keep 20. We use that for buying new boilers, buying new china, the things that we don't want to take out of the resident daily. We want the money coming in from rent to be really just spent on the residents. So it's capital projects, refurbishing the dining room, the restaurant we're just getting ready to do. That comes from that 20% that we keep. 80% goes back to the resident at end of life or their estate, or if they move out, or if their finances have dwindled because they've lived, and we hope 20, 30 years with us, and some residents do live that long in our communities, they can actually they can charge their rent against their 80% entrance fee, because the last thing you want is for anyone to have to move out. So you can basically borrow your money back that you would get at end of life.
I get more than 80%.
Yes, Lynn is a pioneer. She laughs when I call her that, but our pioneers, we wanted to say thank you. It was also during 2008 when it was that weird recession again.
Oh,
And so all of our residents who came in at that time, when we opened the doors, we made them 100% refundable. We didn't keep any of their entrance fee because we wanted to say thank you.
well, and we got also at that time, and I'm sure you can understand this because it wasn't built. We got to choose the type of cupboards I wanted and the type of counters I wanted and the type of carpet I wanted from, from the ones that they allowed us to choose from, the color of my unit, which now, of course, they can't unless they want to share the place apart,
Yeah,
which some do.
some do, but then they're paying for it themselves.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
We're not replacing nice countertops because people don't like the color anymore unless you want to pay yourself.
I have the best.
Yeah.
What's that?
What's your favorite thing? What's your favorite thing that makes
Yeah.
you recommend us to others?
Final question. Lynn, what is your favorite thing that Aljoya offers that makes you recommend them to others?
Safety.
Mm.
More than anything. I will tell you, Nancy, and whoever asked that question, I have, as you well know, an anxiety problem. And so I had lived in my home for over 50 years. And I thought, I wonder what's going to happen when I come down here, just down the hill, but still, it's away from my home of 50 years. When I put my head down on that pillow for the first night, am I going to sleep or am I going to have an anxiety attack? I put my head down on that pillow and said, I don't have any worries. I don't have anything to think about other than to just sleep, wake up in the morning and, start another day. The simple fact of not having to be concerned about your life. And nowadays, of course, I came 16 years ago when we didn't have the problems that we have today out in the world. But safety now, of course, being such a big one. And Mercer Island itself is a lot safer than a lot of places. But still, things do happen. We had something just recently.
Mhm.
But, that if you need help, as Marla said, I've got a button. All I need to do is push it and somebody will be here. So, and of course, obviously, socialization as well. But I have two very good friends who are stuck in their homes here on the island. And one is 96 and the other one's 90. And they're both very, very lonely. Very. And I get phone calls from both of them on a regular basis and tried to get both of them down here. And unfortunately, their kids don't want to let them. So as long as the children have the say-so, the individuals, and there's one is a girl and the other one's a man. And they're both, as I say, in their 90s, and they're not happy. But
Socialization is really,
But what's nice about a place like this, Nancy, is that there are times that I don't leave here in my own apartment. I get busy reading a book that I can't put down. And so I cook my own meals and watch a little TV and go to bed. If I'm feeling that I want to talk to somebody, I can go out and find somebody that is either just sitting right outside the nurse's station by the coffee machine, free coffee, by the way, every day, and sit down and chat with them, so you have that freedom of, yes, I want company. No, I don't. And it's great. I just highly recommend it.
Ladies, you have been phenomenal as usual. Thank you so much.